इम्पॉर्टेंट शॉर्ट नोट जो जनरल एनाटॉमी से पूछी जा सकती है, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज अ लॉज ऑफ ऑसिफिकेशन। तो ये एक वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट शॉर्ट नोट है जो यूनिवर्सिटी एग्जाम में पूछी जा सकती है। सो व्हाट आर द लॉज ऑफ ऑसिफिकेशन? बिफोर दैट, ऑसिफिकेशन मीन्स क्या? सेंटर ऑफ ऑसिफिकेशन मीनिंग क्या? और दो टाइप के सेंटर्स रहते हैं, प्राइमरी सेंटर ऑफ ऑसिफिकेशन एंड सेकेंडरी सेंटर ऑफ ऑसिफिकेशन। So what is ossification? That is nothing but a process of formation of bone। तो सबसे पहले जो कार्टिलेज फॉर्म होता है, कार्टिलेज या मेम्ब्रेन, इससे बोन किस तरह से फॉर्म होता है, दैट प्रोसेस इज कॉल्ड एज ऑसिफिकेशन। तो व्हाट इज ऑसिफिकेशन? इट इज अ प्रोसेस ऑफ फॉर्मेशन ऑफ बोन from either cartilage or the membrane, and that is called as a ossification. What is center of ossification? Where this first start, from the point where it start the process of calcium deposition in the membrane and cartilage is called as a center of ossification. And what is primary center of ossification? It is the center of ossification which appears before birth, and this process start which before birth is called as a primary center of ossification. And which part of the bone forms the primary center of ossification? Is the shaft, okay, and that we called as a diaphysis. So the part of the bone which forms from the primary center of ossification is called as a diaphysis. Primary center of ossification is the center of ossification which appears before birth. Normally it appears at the 7th or the 8th week of intrauterine life. That is primary center of ossification. What is secondary center of ossification? The center of ossification which appear after birth, and these are the centers which appears after birth, and from there which part of long bone is formed? Epiphysis. So what is epiphysis? The part of the long bone which is formed from the secondary center of ossification. These are nothing but the ends of the long bones. These are called as the ends of the long bones, epiphysis and diaphysis. So what we understand now, what is ossification? It is the process of formation of bone either from the cartilage or the membrane. What is center of ossification? It is the point where ossification start or first start, that is called as the center of ossification. In the center of ossification we have two centers, one is the primary center and one is the secondary center of ossification. What is primary center of ossification? The center which appear first is the primary, and generally it appears before birth in the 7th or 8th week of intrauterine life. And from this, which part of young long bone is formed? The shaft, that we call as a diaphysis. Secondary center of ossification, this appears after birth. These are called as the secondary center of ossification. From it forms the ends of the long bone. We call it as a epiphysis. So after understanding ossification, center of ossification, the difference between the primary and secondary center of ossification, now we are going to the laws of ossification. So what are the laws of ossification? Laws of ossifications. It is asked as a short note. It is very important. It is also asked in the viva many times. So first law of ossification: primary center of ossification appears before birth and usually is a single. Okay, So primary center of ossification, it appears before birth and it is usually single. That states the first law of ossification. ओके, सो उससे क्या डेवलप होता है, शाफ्ट ऑफ द लॉन्ग बोन. सो दीज आर जनरली सिंगल. ओके, but the exceptions are the carpal and tarsals, mainly cuneiform and navicular bone. This appears after birth. Which primary centers appears after birth? The center of ossification of carpals and tarsals, cuneiform and navicular bone, and clavicle has two primary centers of ossification, because clavicle partly developed from the cartilage and partly from membrane, and that's why it has two primary centers of ossification. So first laws of ossification, primary centers appears before birth and they are usually single, and exceptions to this law is, example is a clavicle which has a two primary center of ossification, and cuneiform and navicular bone, these are the tarsal bones which ossifies after birth. Second laws of ossification is, secondary center of ossification appear after birth, can be single or multiple. Secondary center of ossification, they appear after birth and they may be single or the multiple. So what is exception? Lower end of fibula, so lower end of femur and upper end of fibula, these centers appears before birth, though they are secondary centers, and it has some its medico-legal importance. Okay, so what is secondary center of ossification? Second law suggests they centers appears after birth usually, but the lower end of the femur and upper end of the fibula, they appear before birth, and where it violates the laws of ossification. It has some medico-legal importance. Suppose a stillbirth, a baby born dead, then how to know that baby is born dead? After birth, yeah, before birth. Then if you take the x-ray of that baby and there is the lower end of the femur and upper end of the fibula, they are not ossified, that means, okay, they are not ossified, that means the secondary center of ossification generally not completed, and if they are ossified, that means these centers completed 9 months after, okay, of intrauterine life. So if there is a 9 month of intrauterine life, then there is these centers get fused to form completely one bone, and if it is less than that, then these centers are not ossified and they are separated from the bone, and here we can state that the death of the fetus is either stillbirth, that is it is born dead, and the or either not, or death is occurred after birth. Okay, so according to that age and the appearance of the center, we can state it. Okay, third law of ossification is the direction of nutrient foramina. Nutrient foramina. So direction of the nutrient foramina is opposite to growing end of the bone. Growing end of bone. So what is the third law? The direction of the nutrient foramina. Suppose ये अगर लॉन्ग बोन है, यहाँ पे न्यूट्रिएंट फोरामेना का डायरेक्शन टू दिस साइड है, तो ग्रोइंग एंड इज द दिस वन. So growing end is the almost opposite. That suggests the third law of ossification. Fourth law of ossification. Epiphysis is what? It is developed from the secondary center of ossification. Okay, the secondary center of ossification for pressure epiphysis appears before that of the traction epiphysis. Okay, so secondary center of pressure epiphysis appears before as compared to traction epiphysis. Okay, that is the fourth law of ossification. Okay, fifth law of ossification is secondary center of ossification appear first, fuses last with the secondary center which appear first, fuses last with shaft. The center of ossification, secondary center of ossification which appear first is the fuses last with the shaft, that is so lower end of the fibula. Secondary center for upper end appears later, but the secondary center of lower end which appear first fuses earlier with the shaft of the fibula. That is where it is the exception. What is the lower end of the fibula? Lower end of the fibula is an example of pressure epiphysis. Okay, it is an example of pressure epiphysis, and upper end of the fibula is an example of traction epiphysis. Okay, so pressure epiphysis fuses early, though lower end of the tibia epiphysis center appear first, it also fuses first because it is an example of pressure epiphysis. And upper end of the fibula is example of traction epiphysis, that's why it fuses later. Though it appears late, it fuses later. Okay, that is how it violates the laws of, so fibula violates both these two laws of ossifications. Okay, one is the second law, lower end of the femur and upper end of the fibula, though it is secondary center appear after birth, but normally at these cases it appears before birth. And this is the secondary center which appear first, fuses last with the shaft. Okay, sixth law of ossification, secondary center fuses together to form a single epiphysis, that is called as compound epiphysis, which in turn fuses with the diaphysis. फॉर एग्जाम्पल उसके लिए एक्सेप्शन क्या है? अपर एंड ऑफ द फ्यूमर हैज़ 3 secondary centers, one for the head, one for the greater trochanter, one for the lesser trochanter. Each epiphysis, okay, fuses independently. Okay, that is a okay, and then with the shaft in a reverse order of the appearance, that follows the lesser trochanter at the age of 13 years first, then following the greater trochanter at the 14 years, and then the head around the 16 years. Like this there is a sequence. Okay, that states the sixth law of ossification. So these are the 6 laws of ossification. So before getting the laws of ossification, first you should know what is ossification, then what is center of ossification, what is primary center of ossification, what is secondary center of ossification. And after getting this concept, then we will go for the laws of ossification. ये वाइवा में भी ये सारे डेफिनेशंस पूछे जाते हैं बोन के वाइवा में, एंड एग्जाम में भी शॉर्ट नोट आती है लॉज ऑफ ऑसिफिकेशन. सो फर्स्ट लॉ ऑफ ऑसिफिकेशन, प्राइमरी सेंटर appears बिफोर बर्थ एंड यूजुअली सिंगल. ओके, सो ऑल बोन्स को ये अप्लाई होगा एक्सेप्ट कौन सा एग्जाम्पल है? क्लेविकल विच हैज़ अ 2 primary center of ossification. Why? Because half of the clavicle is developed in the membrane, half of the clavicle is developed from the cartilage. Okay, so that is the first law, and they generally appear before birth. बट क्यूनिफॉर्म एंड नेविकुलर बोन उनका जो प्राइमरी सेंटर है दे अपियर आफ्टर बर्थ, that is the exception. Secondary center of ossifications appears after birth generally. So what is exception to it? Lower end of the femur and upper end of the fibula, उनका center of ossification appears before birth. Okay, उसका एक मेडिको लीगल सिग्निफिकेंस है. अगर बेबी जो बॉर्न हुआ ये प्री मैच्योर बॉर्न होके डेथ हुआ या मैच्योर हुआ था उसके बाद डेथ हुई, ये कैसे आइडेंटिफाई करेंगे? अगर नी जॉइंट का एक्सरे लेंगे, अगर वहाँ पे लोअर एंड ऑफ द फीमर एंड द अपर एंड ऑफ फिबुला ऑसिफाइड है तो दैट fetus is mature fetus and then there occurs the death. And if that is immature, so that is a immature delivery, फिर abortion हुआ, whatever the causes will be there, okay, तो उसकी वजह से जो डेथ होगी उसमें ये समझ में आएगा कि ये प्री मैच्योर था और उसकी डेथ हो गई क्योंकि वहाँ पे देर विल बी अ गैप इन द सेंटर्स. ओके, सो दैट इज सेकंड लॉ. थर्ड लॉ क्या है? द ग्रोइंग एंड ऑफ द बोन. The direction of nutrient phenomena opposite to that end is the growing end of the long bone. Then fourth law of ossification क्या है? Secondary center of ossification for pressure epiphysis appears early as compared to traction epiphysis. तो ईच लॉन्ग बोन में कुछ प्रेशर एपिफाइसिस रहेंगे, कुछ ट्रैक्शन. उसमें से प्रेशर एपिफाइसिस सेंटर विल appear before as compared to traction epiphysis. Okay, so that is the law suggest. Okay, fifth example, the law is the secondary center which appear first, okay, fuses last. Okay, उसके लिए क्या एक्सेप्शन है? लोअर एंड ऑफ द फिबुला. लोअर एंड ऑफ द फिबुला is the secondary center appears later. ओके, तो लोअर एंड ऑफ द जो फिबुला है, ये फिबुला है सपोज, ये अपर एंड है, ये लोअर एंड है. अपर एंड इज यहाँ पे उसका मसल से अटैच रहता है बाइसेप फ्यूमोरिस, सो दैट इज अ एग्जांपल ऑफ ट्रैक्शन एपिफाइसिस. लोअर एंड इज अ एग्जांपल ऑफ प्रेशर एपिफाइसिस. So pressure epiphysis fuse early, so it fuses early. Okay, so law suggests जो सेंटर फर्स्ट एपियर होगा वो लास्ट में फ्यूज होगा. तो ये it appears first and it fuses first, and this appears later and it fuses later. That is what. Okay, so lower end of the fibula, the secondary center of upper end fuses later, but the secondary center of lower end which appear first is fuses first. ओके, उसका रीज़न क्या है? क्योंकि लोअर एंड प्रेशर एपिफाइसिस का एग्जांपल है और अपर एंड ट्रैक्शन का एग्जांपल है. तो ट्रैक्शन लैटर फ्यूज होगा, तो ऑब्वियसली लोअर एंड है जो फर्स्ट अपीयर हुआ तो ये भी फर्स्ट ही फ्यूज होगा बिकॉज इट इज एग्जांपल ऑफ प्रेशर एपिफाइसिस. सिक्स्थ लॉ ऑफ ओसिफिकेशन, सेकेंडरी सेंटर फ्यूज टुगेदर टू फॉर्म अ single epiphysis which in turn fuses with the diaphysis. पर यानी एक लोअर एंड है और इसमें ये दो एपिफाइसिस है, तो ये दो एपिफाइसिस फ्यूज होंगे एक दूसरे की तरफ एंड देन इट फ्यूजेस विद द बोन दैट नॉर्मली. ओके, पर अपर एंड ऑफ द फ्यूमर में क्या है? हेड के लिए एक सेंटर आएगा, ग्रेटर ट्रोकेंटर के लिए एक सेंटर आएगा, लेसर ट्रोकेंटर के लिए एक सेंटर आएगा. तो हेड का एक अलग सेंटर बनेगा, ये अलग बनेगा, ये अलग बनेगा. हेड का अपर और शाफ्ट से अलग फ्यूज होगा, ग्रेटर ट्रोकेंटर का अलग फ्यूज होगा और हेड का अलग फ्यूज होगा. दैट इज हाउ दे इंडिपेंडेंटली फ्यूजेस विद द शाफ्ट. सो हियर आर द 6 laws of ossification, how they appears and what are their exceptions that you have to write in the exam. ये वाइवा में भी काफ़ी टाइम पूछा जाता है.